Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Our guest today is Jordan Burton. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily.
So can you give folks just a quick intro of yourself and then maybe describe where you fit in the interviewing private equity ecosystem?
Sure. I actually occupy a couple of spaces there. I'm an executive assessor. So one hat that I wear is that I'm a professional interviewer. So investors will hire my firm to evaluate senior execs that they're considering hiring into a CEO or CFO or other senior leadership role. So that's kind of me as the interviewer. The other hat that I wear is trainer. So I teach a lot of investors as well as a lot of operating companies, a lot of high growth organizations, how to interview better, how to hire better, sort of a set of principles to improve their success rate in hiring the people that are the right fit and have the right skills.
So you're working with companies to try to make a good candidate experience for the candidate themselves, but also just a good interview loop so they get top talent into their org.
That's right. There's sort of two goals. You want to make sure that you find the right person, that you get the data that you need to make sure that you're going to make a hire that's going to be great for them and great for you and your organization. You also want to deliver a great candidate experience. And the two actually are not mutually exclusive. You can do both by the right sort of strategies and the right techniques.
So I've been at companies where we engage with like an executive search firm to go like, we need a SVP of sales and marketing. We need a new CTO. Go find us those people. And they will interview the C-suite team and say, like, what are you looking for? What's important? And then they'll go source the candidates and kind of run point on that interview process. You kind of sit, would you say you sit kind of a layer above that, or how would you differentiate between executive search and placement?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we certainly work with and are close to a lot of exec search firms that do the sourcing part of it. In an ideal process, we're involved very early on in helping shape what that profile is. So those conversations with the CEO, or if it's a CEO, hire the investor, or with other stakeholders in the hire, is something that we get involved in as well. And we'll work with the search firm in helping scope that role. But candidates get sourced. So when I'm actually doing the assessments myself, candidates get sourced, and I'm typically towards the end of the process doing a very deep interview, sort of multi-hour interview to get to know the candidates who make it through towards the end of the process. So it's a different role, the assessment role, as opposed to the sourcing or recruiting role, but it's kind of all part of one big ecosystem.
Okay. And as I understand it, you would work with, let's say, a CEO, like soup to nuts on this entire process. So if I'm a CEO of a 100-person company and I've had my cousin doing the accounting and bookkeeping so far, and I'm thinking I need a CFO, but I'm not quite sure. And if so, what does that look like? And what do I need and all that? If I were to engage with you, where would you start?
Yeah. So if I'm engaged as a trainer coach, that would mean we would talk about the entire process stem to stern. So we would talk about how to better define the role. We would talk about who should get involved in the interviews, what roles they should play. We get to the level of talking about what questions to ask, what's the information that we want to draw out from candidates, and then certainly how do we gather that data, make the right decision, all the way through onboarding the candidate. So as a sort of coach or trainer, I'm advising across that entire process. If I happen to be part of that process myself as the assessor, I would typically slot in towards the end to do that deeper interview.
Okay. So let's say in this example, I'm hiring you for everything.
Okay.
Would the first conversation be like, do I really need a CFO? Or would you say maybe you just need a VP of finance or a controller? Or like, would you have that type of conversation?
Your question is more forward thinking than a lot of companies are, amazingly so. Truly. There's so many times we come into situations where they say, we need a CMO, we need a CFO, or we need insert name of role. The very first questions that we ask as part of this role definition, this critical step in the process, what's the business need that's underpinning this hire? What's not happening in the company that needs to happen? So we have a dialogue from first principles around what really What's the thing that this person's going to be filling? What's the impact that we want this person to have? And you're right. Many times that conversation can lead us to say, you know what? It's not really a CFO. We may not be there yet. It's actually kind of more of a controller, or it's a head of FP&A, or there's some other narrower role that we can. This isn't the majority of time. Usually clients will know that there's a very specific set of things that they need that fits into a certain role. But yes, it does happen that when we really get down to what needs to happen in the business, it can actually shape what we call the role.
Yeah. So it could be like a fractional CFO or all these different variations, but it sounds like you help them answer the question for themselves of like, what am I actually looking for? Like, CFO might pop into my head, but here's like what I actually need to happen in my business. So you help
That's
them
right.
with that part. And once that's done, then it's like, okay, now we have something to work with. Let's build out this process.
That's exactly right. And I would say typically the first time we do that, I'll be leading that conversation. My goal in those interactions is for them to build the skill of knowing the questions to ask to where they don't need me to create that profile. So
Okay.
we want to have this sort of one-pager crisp definition of what we're looking for. I think one of the most powerful things an organization can do is to build the muscle memory of how to do that on a consistent basis. And frankly, not only for hires, but for everyone in the company. Everyone has a set of things that they need to get done and a set of quality, skills, characteristics, competencies that they need to embody. So I think there's just so much upside and so much value from this ability to articulate what a role is all about.
Yeah. Are there any other steps before you would publicly post a job description or perhaps engage with like the external search piece of it? Are there any other steps where you've got to get your ducks in a row before you kick that thing off?
That's a great question. I would say in an exec search situation, there's typically a few rounds of refining that profile, kind of getting super clear on what we want, having the right stakeholders involved in that discussion. But once we've got that defined, we're typically ready to start the search. I would say the very next step is typically who is the right search partner, given what we're looking for, who is the right search partner to help us. And there are some who are just incredible specialists with certain industries, geographies, company sizes, et cetera. So that's certainly a step in the process before you actually go source. For mid to junior level candidates where there isn't going to be an exec search firm involved, I actually would hit pause before saying our next step is to post it to the world. That certainly should be part of your strategy. Let's find candidates out there that we don't know. We do encourage the CEOs that we work with, the leadership teams that we work with, to really take a step and say, who might I know in my networks that can lead me to attractive candidates? Not let's go hire my friend, but who are the people in our company's networks, the people that I know and trust, especially the people that represent the diversity that I want to create, because they probably also have connections to candidates like that, to actually do some networking before we just jump straight to job posting. You can be a bit more targeted. You can go actively seek diversity as opposed to just hoping that it comes to you through a job post.
And that's inherently through a referral that you assumingly trust and respect.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the criteria that I would place on that is the person that I'm connecting with to try to source ideas, to try to come up with potential candidates. Are they somebody who I would trust their read on this kind of a role, this kind of a candidate? Are they sort of a high performer themselves? Are they somebody that is likely to know and discriminate well the high performers in their networks? And then secondly, of course, are they somebody who's likely to have access to diverse talent pools, or is it going to be more of the same of what we already have in the company?
Yeah. And then, so you mentioned kind of bringing some other stakeholders into that discussion. Is that to help define that profile? Are you asking them and having kind of debrief with them? Like, what would you be looking for when we're hiring for this role? Or what do you think is important? What conversations are you having there?
It's interesting. It sort of depends on the role. It depends on the organization and its values and culture and norms. In highly collaborative organizations, we tend to find that, yes, let's call it the hiring committee. It's a different group of people for different roles, but there's a set of stakeholders that are going to be the primary ones, vetting hires, scoping the role, vetting hires, weighing in on the decision. In most situations, yes, they'll be heavily involved in sort of shaping what this profile is.
Yeah.
It is helpful, though, that the hiring manager ultimately is the one who can curate and sort of triage all the information that comes in and say, this is really what it is. But yes, gathering input and weighing in on that role definition, and then transitioning from architect of the role into interviewer, saying, what are the aspects that I, as a future peer of this person and the head of marketing or VP marketing or whatever it may be, what's the role that I can uniquely play? Looking at what's in here, there's certain elements that I'm uniquely positioned to be able to vet, to where I play a specialized role as an interviewer rather than trying to cover everything about the candidate comprehensively.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, yeah, it might be in that marketing example. It's like, hey, from a marketing perspective, I'm looking for this, this, and this from my colleague, and so I
Yeah.
need to be able to cover these. So, can you help me, like, just brainstorm some questions about how I could get to that in the interview? That seems like what's happening at that stage of the process.
That's right. So if we were to take a role such as, let's say it's a controller role. It's not CFO, but it's a controller.
Okay.
And they're going to have influence in different parts of the organization. And we feel like we've got the right hiring committee, maybe 6 or 7 people who are very close to this hire. Some might even be team members, future direct reports of this person.
Yep.
I would look at that role definition, and that's a set of like, what are the results that we need this person to deliver? What are the competencies that we need them to exhibit? Really differentiated factors that are going to make this person successful and happy here, and say, what are the clusters of your, like, there's one of these things that's around technical accounting skills. We know the person needs to be deep there. There's probably some team members. There may be an advisor. There may be a CFO who might be the hiring manager who's very well equipped to go deep in those areas. Now, there may be some other stakeholder. There may be sort of a head of sales ops or something like that. That's also a key stakeholder in the controller hire. But that's more of like, hey, there's a few of these items that are around ability to work cross-functionally, ability to help build some process and structure around the financial aspects of how we run the sales organization. Maybe that's the areas that I can go deep. So giving people a specialized role that is, that befits what their expertise and knowledge is can be a great way to make sure we don't have redundant interviews.
Yeah. No, I love that, because when I was on the interview loop for a CIO and our CFO, when I was leading a client management team, my job was to say, Emily, can they explain things to you in a way that you can understand? Because I was not like technically deep in those areas, but
Yes.
they needed that person to be able to explain to a quote unquote normal person what they were talking about. And then also for me to take inputs from what was happening in client management and feed that to them and say, what would you ask me about that? Or what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
And so like real life examples. So I love that, where you don't have to be technically proficient in these areas or a subject matter expert. Sometimes it's just as valuable to say, can this person communicate with others across the organization?
Yes. The head of sales ops is probably not going to go deep on GAAP accounting, but they can go deep on, can a person who knows GAAP accounting help me understand what I need to know to run my domain effectively? Can they translate their deep technical knowledge? Someone else is going to vet the deep technical knowledge. I don't have to worry about going into that, but can this person translate? Is this the kind of person who can package the work that they do in a manner that's, suits my level of depth or expertise in accounting myself?
Yes. So my very first interview, like the very first interview I ever did for anyone, was with an actual rocket scientist. She had worked for NASA and she had like 2 PhDs. And I was like, are you kidding me? And so I was like, I have nothing on this. So I asked a question around, can you explain what this very technical word was? And she couldn't do it. And so I asked again, and I asked in a different way, and she couldn't do it. And then when I outbriefed with the team, I was like, no hire, because I can't understand anything she's saying. So, I mean, you can have all the technical smarts in the world, but if you can't communicate that to people, then that's might not be what works.
That's right. I will never forget, years ago, I did an executive assessment on a meteorologist for a hedge fund. There's a lot that they can learn about, like weather patterns and where it's going to be cold and hot. So we had he did a very good job of taking this very esoteric knowledge and distilling it down into layman's terms. And that's such a critical part of being effective in the role. Can you actually interact with people who don't understand everything about pressure systems and temperature gradients and whatnot. But yeah.
Very cool. So once we get to okay, now we're going to reach out to people in our network and or post this job publicly. What happens then? You're kind of behind the scenes, maybe if you're supporting the team, or you're actually in the assessor role if you're working in that function. So what happens next?
Yeah. So the next step in that search is it's basically the top of funnel part. It's the sourcing part. So we've referenced two channels. One is the proactive networking channel, which we love because it again allows us to be proactive about finding high performing talent and diverse talent. If for that pathway, our first step is to engage people. We call it the hook. It's a conversation that we want to have where we learn about these people because they may not be looking for a job, but we're going to have a point person or point people. Sometimes it's the hiring manager who's going to be connecting with these high potentials, learning about them, learning about their passions and interests, drawing out from them, what are the hooks that are going to get them interested in a role? And if it looks like there might be a fit, get them to consent to entering the process. That's one of the most critical parts with a candidate that you network to is making sure that you get their consent to be interviewed to where we don't have an endless tire kicking, we're selling them all the time. Let's actually have them transition from being a prospect into being a candidate. But for those, if we are doing the sort of job posting based, inbound active candidates coming to us, there's typically some sort of a screen. It's often led by a recruiter. Sometimes it's straight to a hiring manager for certain kinds of roles and candidates, but we're going to have some filtering process to where we take a large number of potentials into a short number of ones that are worth a deeper investment.
Okay.
So I would say screening.
Sure. For that first scenario you described, how do you get someone who's like going about their business? I'm not looking for a job, yet tap, tap, someone taps me on the shoulder and is now talking to me in that first conversation. How do you broach that without coming across as just, wildly, salesy and smarmy? Like, oh.
Yeah, I've done a lot of these conversations myself. I think there's an interesting paradox. When you ask about a person from a place of genuine curiosity, people love sharing about themselves. Yeah. The mistake, the way not to have that conversation is to, let's say that I connected through you to some high potential, like high performer, for a given role. If I connect with that person and I just jump on there and I tell you about Talgo and how great we are and how excited we are about this new role in this position. And are you interested? Are you interested? Are you interested? Especially high performing people get sales pitches like that all the time. And it sounds a little desperate. And it's not in service to them. You haven't learned anything about them. And here you are pushing an opportunity. So counterintuitively, my suggestion on this one is get them talking first. Ask about their hopes and dreams and goals, what they love about their current role, what they're excited to do in their careers, maybe what they don't like in their current role. Get a little bit in their heads. They start sharing of themselves with a person who's curious and interested. It's respectful to them, but they're also kind of justifying to themselves, why is it that I'm talking to this Jordan guy? It must be because there's something interesting here, right? In the course of this conversation, if there's enough nuggets to say that this person has passions and interests that align with what I have to offer, then I can transition to a much more tailored sales pitch. I can present the opportunity with a reference point of what they said they care about rather than why I think the role is interesting. Right?
Okay. So in that first outreach, you're not even mentioning the role per se. You might maybe reference the person who connected you.
Okay. Oh, to kick off for sure. If it's going to be somebody that you connected me to, we're going to both bond on how much we love you, how we know you and all that. Like the small talk and just the human connection, of course. But I like to transition it to learning about the other person as opposed to a generic pitch about a role when I haven't even put that in the context of what this person cares about.
Totally. And then, but in that initial outreach, are you just saying, our mutual connection, Emily, thought it would be good for us to connect, or are you more specific than that?
It's, it really depends on the conversation. Let's say it's somebody that we're both super close to. I might go 5 or 10 minutes of just kind of building that connection. And I mean, it would feel appropriate to spend more time talking about that mutual connection point. Some situations less so. But I think for busy people, we don't want to let it be ambiguous and make it feel like it's a waste of their time. So
Yeah.
I generally want to get to the part where I learn about them. Sometimes there's a segue in there when I say, I'm just trying to get to know the best sales engineers out there to learn a little bit about what might be a fit for our organization. Emily told me that you're one of the best that she knows. I'd love to learn a little bit about what inspires, what motivates you. What is it about sales engineering that's so appealing to you, right? And have that be the entry point to learning about the person.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's say a candidate or two comes through this networking
Mm-hmm.
process. And so like these are like top talent, these are referrals. We know these people, we're comfortable with them. How do you have an actual real interview conversation, not the now I'm going to read you a list of 10 questions type of conversations? How do you have an authentic conversation with someone in an interview process where you are being evaluated and it's
Sure.
a two-way street?
Yeah. Here's counterintuitive truth number 2. A lot of people, when they start networking and getting access to people who are like, wow, these are really high performers. And, we're a startup or we're a smaller company. I can't believe that we're having these conversations. It feels weird to be interviewing people. And there's this temptation to jump into a sales pitch. So if you remember from that hook conversation, we get their consent to enter the process. With high performers, that's critical because counterintuitive truth number 2 is high performers want to be vetted. They want somebody to dig deep. Why? They're judging the quality of your team based upon the rigorousness of your process. So I'll say that again. They want selectivity. They like a selective future employer because they want to work with other high performers. And if every conversation is a sales pitch and softball questions, they're going to be like, do you have any filter at all? Or is your team full of a bunch of people that weren't really vetted? So when you dig in, now there's a way you need to dig in, but if you really dig in, ask the hard questions, have the courage to learn about the incredible things about them and have the courage to learn about their mistakes, their weaknesses, their shortfalls, all from a place of curiosity and fascination, that draws the high performer because they're like, you're selective. On the other side of this process is a high performing team. I'm interested.
That's a great one. No, I love that. And talk to me a little bit about, I always, as an interviewer, when I knew I had a candidate that I was like, oh, I like this candidate a lot, I would obviously ask them questions, but then I would kind of drop things into the conversation. Like, and our team is, structured like this. And then our
Sure.
team has this great leader over here. And, I'm not doing a sales pitch. I'm giving them the good, bad, and the ugly, but I'm giving them more information and kind of dropping things out that they can pull on and ask a question about. So it becomes more of a conversation. So I'm wondering how that interview
Yeah.
conversation is for you.
I'll propose a different way to do it. I think
Okay.
your instinct on making sure that they're selling content is awesome. Totally agree. We do not want this interview to be a one-way street where we are just vetting them and we jump off the Zoom or walk out of the room. It needs to be a two-way street. But what I would say is we don't want to blend selling and vetting. If we're constantly going back and forth between I'm selling you the role and now I'm digging in, it can, for most people, it feels a little inappropriate to be really digging in when I just essentially promised you the opportunity. When I'm selling you on how great a role is, I'm kind of saying it's there for you. And then I have to switch roles and say, wait, let's figure out if this is the right fit for you or not. So what we say is there's time for selling in every conversation, and that time is at the end. So have the courage to just ask your questions, learn, really dig in, impress them with your rigor, and leave plenty of time for their questions at the end. Then go crazy. Absolutely sell as much as you can in a way that's relevant to what you've learned about them. I think if we look at the arc of the candidate's journey, in that first conversation, the hook, there's going to be a lot of information that I'm going to communicate with the candidate about the role in the course of essentially getting their consent to enter the process. So they're going to learn some facts about it. They're going to ask some questions about it. We're going to get some data there. When they say, yes, I'm interested in this, I'm ready to enter your process, I am going to go, my next touch point, whether it's me or someone else, of course I'm going to, have all the small talk and the human connection, but then I am going to jump into my questions. I'm really going to do the vetting part of it. And I don't want to slip in a whole lot of like, oh, well, then let me tell you, oh, you just shared a story. Let me reflect a little bit back to you on how we do things. Reason being, when we're sharing that information, we're communicating things that the candidate is picking up on, and it may shape their future responses. So I want to keep it an authentic, just learn about them and not broadcast a lot of elements that a candidate may latch onto
Okay.
and start spinning their story. So I want to have a pure bottoms up learn about them and then say, all right, as promised, we've got plenty of time here at the end. Let me know what's on your mind. You've learned a little bit about the company, about the role. What else is on your mind? And then I want to track what their questions are because that's really valuable information. But that's really where I want to have the space to share more information about the role according to what interests them.
Okay, so you keep that a little closer to the chest for a little bit longer because you don't want them to be able to spin their answers.
I've got a game plan. I have a set of questions, and I want to get through those questions.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we have a period of time where I am, from a place of total curiosity and fascination, asking questions and learning about them. And I want to keep that. Do I share anything about the role? It may be inappropriate not to at certain points, but generally no. So when I'm doing an exec assessment, we are here to learn about you. I'm almost in this place of like I'm writing your memoir and I'm engrossed in your story. And if you see what that looks like with a really well done interview, there's no need to talk about the role. It really is this mutual journey of walking through your life and your story where I'm getting an enormous amount of information and you're feeling my interest, my attention, my curiosity about you. There really isn't a need to invite the flip side of it into it until the end.
Okay. So let's say someone moves past like these first couple rounds and they're like a finalist for a C-suite role. So this is like, we would bring people in for like all day. We would do like multiple day follow-ups and everything like this. How do you position those final stages? So for example, like we would bring them in for all day. We would have like a sequence of people they would meet with all throughout the day. And then they'd have a panel kind of towards the end when they were tired and blah, blah, blah. And we would put people on this panel who were so different. So from different departments, different personalities, especially with salespeople, because salespeople can mirror and flex to who their audience is. And we would give them a panel where it's like, you cannot possibly flex to all these people at once and see what happens. So that's one example of how we did that kind of final round. But I'm curious how you would position this.
I have another controversial reply to this one. We're not big fans of panel interviews.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So first of all, to your initial question around how do you structure the late stages of it, there's different ways to do it for different C-suite roles or other roles. I wouldn't say that there's one right way and it must be a full day and it must be on site in person when it must be this many interviews. I think there's some guiding principles, but I don't think there's only one right way to structure it. But I will say just to this topic of panel interviews, typically companies do panel interviews because they're not taking good notes and capturing the information from their private conversations to where others can almost reproduce that interview. We find panel interviews happen when the mentality of the company is an interview is a performance. Let's bring this person in to perform for us and have us all in the audience together so that we can be certain that we're seeing the same performance. And
what if it's important that they're able to perform in their role, though?
There are situations where there's certain kinds of interviews. There's a category of interviewing that we call problem-solving interviews, which includes things like present our product back to us. Like you said, later stages, that can be appropriate. This is a person who's going to be out on the road selling our product. We would like to see that in action. I think that's a fine way to do it. And if you want to invite more than one person, that's fine. The panel interview that I take issue with is one where we have 6 people in a room, each peppering a different question to where the candidate is breaking and rebuilding rapport with 6 different people, right? No one really gets in that flow state with them. And they have their cards up, they have their guard up, they are carefully managing what they're saying. No one gets them into a relaxed flow state where we can really learn about them and their past.
I've been in interview loops where like this person is going to have to go into a room full of 12 people and deal with 12 personalities and be able to communicate effectively and tell a compelling story. And I want to know if they can do that. And so I'm going to absolutely put them in a panel interview.
I think that's a great idea. If you are legitimately testing something that is a very representative example of what the job entails, that would be the equivalent of giving a business case interview to a aspiring consultant or investment banker, or giving a coding skills interview to a software developer. We love those. I think that's a valid thing to do. Just to be clear that that's what we're here to do, as opposed to mixing learning about you and your past and what you've done in a group dynamic where you are in the hot seat and you're carefully managing your words. And we're really just judging how well you perform for us and sharing your stories. Fine, just be clear that we're doing that and that we're not actually trying to learn about their past.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's role dependent for sure. I think we're both saying that. And I think it is being clear about what portion of the interview process this is. You mentioned the software folks. So our technology team they would put this problem on the board, which was impossible to solve. And they would have people stand up there and try to solve it. And basically they were like, how does this person like work through a problem that's unsolvable? And I was like, that's so mean. But they were like, it tells us a lot about how they go about it. So I would walk by the interview, like the conference room, which had a big window, and these poor people were just up at the board, like sweating and like, flummoxed and stuff. So
I hope they let people know it was unsolvable. Did they?
I think they did at the very end, but they let them kind of work through it.
Yeah, I think for some people that would be a not great candidate experience if they didn't know.
Yeah. But if they work under pressure. So, okay. So what happens after that? So maybe you have two finalists. Are you helping that executive team or that kind of hiring team like decide, like just asking good questions, like prompting, like, okay, what's most important here? Tell me a little bit more about what you saw with candidate A and candidate B. What does that kind of internal debrief look like?
Yeah. Again, there is no one perfect way to do it. There are definitely guiding principles, and we have a perspective on some don'ts. What I would say is post-interview, let's say that you were part of this interviewing team and I was as well. We both played specialist roles, right? I went deep in the areas that I'm most qualified to go deep in. You did as well. Let's rate those areas and let's have some agreed upon rating rubric. Maybe it's 1 to 4, where a 3 is at the mark, 4 is above the mark, like they're going to raise the bar in this area. A 2 is just below the mark, and a 1 is like no go. Let's rate based upon the data that we gathered about this person, and let's share that data. Let's actually talk about the anecdotes that came out, the stories, the numbers, the metrics, the results. Let's share what we learned about the candidate to a central aggregator. That could be software, it could be a recruiting coordinator, but someone gathers my input, your input, all the other people's input blindly, right? Then when we go into the room to make the decision, the full data set, it's actually good. Once all that data is in, play it back to everyone. Everyone can see everyone's data. But now we actually change our role when we go into the decision-making room. I'm no longer there casting a decision, casting a vote based upon my private experience. The reason we don't want to do that, if I was supposed to go deep on certain technical skills and not cross-functional leadership or change management or interpersonal, I was supposed to go deep on why are you asking me if I'd hire this person or not? I don't know. I can tell you they rate very strongly on the technical skills. But the moment you ask me, would you hire this person? My next interview, I'm going to feel compelled to cover everything. I'm going to feel like I need to cover it all because I have to provide a holistic opinion. And now I'm no longer a specialist. And now we're all trying to cover everything. We're an inch deep and a mile wide. So there was a whole lot in that. I hope that made sense.
No, I like that approach because you're taking all the pieces that you asked, like you specialize in this area, or Emily, you cover like fit, like team fit. Can they communicate to people in different departments? And then you're showing that whole picture all together and discussing it holistically.
There's a magic moment when everybody's data comes in and the data's different because we did different things in our interviews because we're coordinated and we're not asking redundant questions. And you look at this and go, wow, we have learned 7 hours of content from this person as opposed to the same hour 7 times, right?
Yeah.
And we look at this data set and we go, there's a whole lot here. And now, even though I may have said I rated them very highly on technical skills, I'm looking at these other anecdotes that you drew out of your interviews, and I'm going, this is not a great interpersonal fit for us. They collaborate in a very different way than we do, and it would be disruptive here. So I'm fully empowering team members, certainly in environments where consensus is important. I want every team member to be able to articulate their holistic view of the candidate, but I want that to be based on the combined data set from everybody, not on their private experience.
Gotcha. Where do you come down on like behavioral assessments like Myers-Briggs or DISC?
Yeah, we get asked this a lot. And it's funny that we have some clients who really do get a lot of value from either psychometrics or aptitude type tests. Generally speaking, I have not found them to be hugely needle moving on the yes or no decision. They add some color, they add some richness. They can help point out issues that we might want to dig deeper on in interviews. The challenge that I have with them is that they're by definition not tailored to the context and to the role. They are put against a generic framework. Myers-Briggs is, it is the EIS, F, PJ, all those, but like it's the same thing for everyone. There's no right or wrong one, right? It's different ways of being. I find that they add insight into the individual and the human, but rarely is that the thing that makes it a go or no go.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen them used for, what would this skill set or kind of value or approach bring to the existing team, which can be kind of useful. And then I think certainly like I've been familiar with DISC and I've used DISC profiles like once someone is in seat, just so we can talk about like this person likes communication this way and this one likes it this way. So we're all aware of that.
They're marvelous team building tools and they're so great for helping people understand each other. Oh, I'm different. I'm an S, you're an N. That means that I'm focused down here and you're thinking about the world.
Yeah.
What a beautiful way to help people appreciate intellectual diversity. Yeah.
Gotcha. You mentioned you work at the investor level, but then also at the company level. So if someone's listening, where do you, who do you typically work with?
Yeah, I would say really our focus is on working with companies. By virtue of working with a lot of high growth technology companies, we have caught a lot of attention from their investors. So we do work with a lot of venture capital firms, a lot of private equity firms. But our core product, we have a way for individual learners who say, I want to get good at interviewing. I want to be better as a hiring manager. We have a program, Talgo On Demand. So it's talgo.io is our website. Very easy link there for Talgo On Demand. That program is really tailored more towards operating companies as opposed to investors. That said, investors will get tons of value out of it and will learn the same skills. But we also, of course, do private training. So if the whole company wants to upskill, that is certainly our sweet spot of like coming in and doing a training or doing a Zoom-based series, those sorts of things.
Okay. So if you go to talgo.io, will there be online modules that people can work through?
Yes.
Or are those all? Okay. So you have that level. And then you've got like the live trainings where you could come on site for a day, a couple days, train a team. And then you have kind of, I don't know, the comprehensive or fully immersive where Jordan will come and work with you on this whole process, soup to nuts. Those are kind of the different offerings you have.
Yeah, that's right. So there's the asynchronous model, the Talgo On Demand model, which is great. Also, even if we do a private training, it's a resource you can use when new team members come on board for them to continue to learn. And that's also paired with live experiences. I don't think you can learn to interview without some live components. So you'll go through some very engaging, short videos of like watching actual interviews that we're conducting, learn all these skills, but then you'll have an experience with us to do live coaching. And then there's, like you said, there is a video version of our live training, which is your whole company goes through a series, call it 90-minute, 120-minute, 3 sessions every Friday at 9 a.m. or something. And then Matt and I will show up in person, my business partner, Matt. We typically do the trainings together. We can show up at your company and the whole management team, other key hiring managers, recruiters, et cetera, have a shared experience in a room.
Very cool. All right. We'll have all that information in the show notes. But Jordan, thank you very much for being on. We've covered a lot of ground and it was great speaking with you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.